All right, check out this bad boy. 12 megabytes of RAM, 500 megabyte hard drive, built-in spreadsheet capabilities, and a modem that transmits at over 28,000 BPS.
Wow. What are you going to use it for?
Games and stuff.
It's laughable, right? I mean, by today's standards, yeah, definitely. 12 megabytes of RAM. But Chandler was right. At this point in the show, roughly 1994, what he had was top of the line. The one he's sporting is actually a compact Contura. The 12 megabytes of RAM was a special feature, as was his unique color display. Not the prettiest looking thing, but if you wanted a portable computer back in the day, you really had no choice. I mean, check out those bezels. Wow. So 22 years later, we have this, what I believe to be one of the most beautiful laptops in existence, not only for its relative size nor almost bezel-less display, but also its attention to the finer details, a carbon fiber finish on the inside, CNC machined aluminum front and back panels, sturdy hinge, and seamless trackpad. It's not a perfect laptop, as you'll see here shortly, but I believe it's the closest anyone's ever gotten. Meet the Dell XPS 13. Let's begin with a tour. The top aluminum panel reveals only a Dell logo, an excellent size in my opinion, fits the form factor. The bottom much of the same, 2 extended rubber feet to prop it up, a vent that spans the entire contour, and an XPS labeled plate that can be lifted up to reveal unique product information. The back sports nothing but a hinge, and the front reveals only a subdued white LED when charging. The right side reveals a single USB 3.0 port with power share, as well as a full-size SD card reader, and the left another 3.0 port, a charging port, a USB Type-C Thunderbolt 3 port, a headphone microphone jack, and an LED battery notification hub. Opening the laptop, we find a chiclet keyboard with well-spaced keys, but that aren't necessarily the biggest. I wish they were slightly bigger than they already are. Roughly 1.3 millimeters of key travel, still a huge improvement from my 12-inch MacBook, mind you. They're a bit mushy, not as tactile as I'd like, but nothing to pout over. They're LED backlit, adjustable via the F10 key. These are dedicated switches, by the way, so no function button needed. I'm glad to see that Dell didn't compromise on the shift key extension. Look, I know it doesn't sound like a big deal to those of you who only use the left shift key, but try only using the right one from now on, and you'll see exactly where I'm coming from with the Yoga 910. To the right of the keyboard, you'll find a power button with a slight linear illumination, nothing overkill, glad to see it, followed by one other piece of important hardware worth mentioning down below, the trackpad. It's not as smooth as my MacBooks, nor as responsive, but it's still pretty darn good. 2-finger scrolling is cake if calibrated correctly, tap clicking can be done anywhere, and the left and right physical clicks are prudent yet defined. Now let's talk about the XPS lineup hallmark, the screen. If the form factor alone doesn't reveal how far we've come in just a couple of decades, this infinity display surely does. What you're looking at is a 13.3-inch edge-to-edge glossy IXO IPS panel capable of insane viewing angles and fairly accurate color reproduction with minor calibration. This here is the stock calibration, what you'd get out of the box in terms of color reproduction. At 3200 by 1800 pixels, it boasts a higher PPI density than Apple's own MacBook Pro Retina models, 276 PPI versus 226, and while not as accurate on the Adobe RGB spectrum as the Apple counterpart, this variant of the XPS sports a touchscreen. This display is also fairly bright, approaching 400 nits of brightness compared to 300 to 350 from its closest competitors. It varies from model to model and even unit to unit, although nowhere near the brightness of the MacBook at roughly 500. And now the infamous trademark of the XPS lineup, introducing the chin cam. How lovely. You won't look great from really any angle, and there's really no fix for that here, seeing as though this isn't a 2-in-1 laptop, but I'd rather have this gorgeous display than a gorgeous camera angle, just my personal preference. At 720p 30 FPS, it's nothing to brag about, but at least it's not 12-inch MacBook quality. Yeah, I went there. Now let's discuss internals. I bought this one fully loaded. Kaby Lake Core i7 7500U, 16GB of RAM, 512GB solid state drive, and of course the QHD Plus display. You can purchase much cheaper variants of this laptop, one sporting a 1080p matte screen for example, or a Core i3 or Core i5 counterpart, and smaller storage increments as low as 128GB. The cheapest combination will run you around $800 US, although I recommend at least opting for a Core i5 if you're going to buy an XPS 13. while this model here is more in the ballpark of about $1,500. The only thing I could have still upgraded potentially was the SSD. Dell does offer a 1 terabyte version, but it's nothing I'm willing to drop an extra $200 on at this point. Storage and the Wi-Fi card are both swappable, by the way, in this laptop, although I'm not sure why you'd want to replace the killer 1535 wireless AC card from Qualcomm. It's already plenty fast as it is. Speakers are moderately tinny, typical of most Ultrabooks, although I will admit I was a bit spoiled by my 12-inch MacBooks, how the speakers were so good. There are 2 side-firing speakers on the XPS 13 that are decent up to about 50%. Distortion takes over past that. Bass is relatively inaudible. Here's a sound comparison between my 12-inch MacBook and the XPS 13. Lastly, I'd like to discuss battery life. It's a flaky subject, mainly because it varies from user to user as well as model to model. I consider myself a power user. I usually have a few Chrome tabs open as well as Pandora and Microsoft Office, a few other programs running in the background, so that the laptop's not just sitting idle or streaming something like Netflix. I managed to get about 7 to 7.5 hours of battery life at 50% screen brightness. 50, not 15. So half brightness, that's still plenty doable. It's not too dim, it's not like some screens at 50% brightness. Sometimes you can't actually enjoy the screen, but here at 50% it actually looks like some other screens at 75 to 80%. At 100% constant brightness, expect that figure to fall near 5 hours. Netflix and other video streaming, though, thanks to advancements in Kaby Lake architecture, can yield times near 9 to 10 hours. It really all depends on what you're doing, but in general, I'd give it a solid 8 out of 10 in the battery life department. That's a solid 8 out of 10. Most cases, it's around 6 to 7, so I'm glad to see that battery life wasn't compromised here. Not exactly a 12-inch MacBook or even MacBook Pro in this regard, but then again, we're packing twice the power of a 12-inch MacBook into a form factor that really isn't much different. So if you're wondering why I ditched the Yoga 910 for this and decided to just do a review on this one instead, there are 2 reasons. The first is the terribly placed short shift key on the right. If you think that's stupid, whatever, bite me. And the second is the fan noise. The Yoga was so loud and so abrupt. I'd be typing something like a Word document with no background tasks running, no Windows 10 updates ensuing, none of that. I checked Task Manager consistently, and I'd hear the turbo spool. That's what I call it, turbo spool. Very high pitched. Not sure what was causing the CPU to get so hot, but the XPS has experienced none of that. And keep in mind, both of these laptops were sporting the exact same internals. When the fan does kick in on the XPS 13, it's subdued and infrequent, something I expect from an ultra-low power laptop. I'll be uploading both synthetic and gaming benchmarks of this machine in the coming days, as well as a video editing rendering showdown between this and the 12-inch MacBook. For now, I need to edit this video, quickly pack, and be on my way home to Florida tomorrow. What time is it? 3:57 a.m. I really need a hobby. But anyway, that's where I'll see you shortly. You know the routine, thumbs up, thumbs down, subscribe. Thanks for learning with us.